In the spring of 1200 BC, a young girl named Nefertari stood in the courtyard of the Temple of Amun. She was 9 years old. Her father, a minor official, had brought her here as payment for a debt he could not satisfy with silver or grain. As the priest's bronze razor scraped across her scalp, removing every trace of her long black hair, an older priestess struck her across the face. "You have no tears anymore," the woman said. "You have no name anymore. You belong to Amun now, and Amun does not accept weakness." This was Nefertari's introduction to a life of confinement, control, and systematic exploitation. Most people imagine elegant priestesses, revered and protected, noble servants of the gods. But this romanticized image is the propaganda that ancient priests successfully peddled. The titles, God's wives, pure ones, divine adoratresses, masked a reality far darker than any hieroglyph would ever admit. This was not an isolated case. Nefertari was one of thousands of girls. They were brought to the temples through three main mechanisms: pledged offerings, debt payment, human trafficking disguised as piety, and conquest and tribute. Girls like Mutmua, who was captured at age 8 in Nubia by Egyptian soldiers, were seized as war tribute. These girls did not choose this life. They were stripped of agency and choice before they were old enough to understand what was happening. A girl designated for temple service immediately underwent rituals designed with psychological precision to break her will and reconstruct her as temple property. First came the purification bath. This was an invasive examination disguised as a sacred ritual. Priests would inspect the girls' bodies, ostensibly for purity. This established on day one that their bodies were not their own, but belonged to the temple and could be accessed by those claiming religious authority. Then came the renaming. The birth name, the identity that tied them to their family, was declared dead and forbidden. The symbolic death of her former self was complete. Life inside the temple was one of structured, isolated labor. The women worked hours weaving linen or preparing offerings, all labor that benefited the temple as an economic power. Throughout all activity, absolute silence was enforced. Unnecessary conversation was severely punished, preventing the women from forming close bonds that might lead to resistance. If a girl, like Nefertari's friend Takayat, dared to whisper a memory, she was physically beaten and taken away, returning broken, a living warning to all who witnessed it. They were trapped not just by stone walls, but by psychology and economics. Taken as children, they had no money, no connections, and no skills to survive in the world outside. The temple was the only world they would ever know.
If you're starting to understand that what happened to these girls was systematic exploitation disguised as religious devotion, then share this video and hit that like button to help others discover this hidden history. The darkest chapter lies in the sacred union rituals. These were described in poetic languages, reenactments of divine marriage. The truth? High-ranking priests would dress in elaborate costumes, wear the god's mask, and claims to embody the deity himself. Women selected for the ritual were taken to the inner sanctuary and told they were about to receive the god's blessing. They were told that resistance was blasphemy that would bring a divine curse upon all of Egypt. When Nefertari was chosen at age 14, she was surrounded by chanting priests and told to submit completely. These were not consensual relationships. These were coerced violations between powerful men and powerless women, conditioned from childhood to believe that their bodies belonged to the gods and priests spoke with divine authority. Exploitation continued with profound consequences. Some of these women bore children as a result of the sacred unions. These children were considered blessed, but they were immediately property of the temple. Nefertari gave birth to a daughter, but after weaning, the child was taken away to be trained into the same system of servitude. Nefertari was forbidden to even acknowledge their relationship. She was forced to watch her own daughter grow up and be broken just as she had been. The system was self perpetuating, creating new victims from the trauma of the previous generation.
Any woman who questioned the system, spoke of escape, or refused a ritual faced the ultimate penalty: dedication to the desert or return to chaos. A woman named Mutmua, who had borne 3 children to the temple, finally broke. She stood up during a meal and cried out, "This is not holy. We are prisoners. We should resist." She was immediately seized and dragged miles outside the temple into the barren, terrifying desert and abandoned to die of thirst and exposure. The other women were forced to watch Mutmua's agony until she collapsed. Her suffering meant to keep them terrified and obedient. When temple women died, they were not given family tombs. They were buried in unmarked communal pits, a final, systematic erasure of their identity. But these women resisted the erasure in the only way they could. In the dark corners of storage rooms and hidden passageways, some of them stole tools and carved tiny, desperate messages into the stone walls. Mutmua, the Nubian girl, carved her final message just before she died. "I came from beyond the first cataract. My mother's name was a Manitor. I never forgot who I was before they took me. This life was not my choice. To whoever finds this, I existed. I mattered. Remember me." The temples of Egypt still stand. Tourists admire the colossal columns and the beautiful hieroglyphs. But now you know the truth that is carved alongside them. They were Nefertari, sold for a debt. They were Mutmua, stolen in conquest. They were thousands of women whose bodies, labor, and identities were consumed by a system that claimed divine authority for its cruelty. They were not servants of the gods. They were human beings who endured unimaginable exploitation, and they deserve to be remembered. Now that you know, you can see the stones differently. The temples still stand. The stones still remember. And now, so do you. If you believe this kind of history needs to be told, that uncomfortable truths are more important than comfortable myths, then subscribe to this channel right now. We give voice to experiences that official records tried to hide. Hit that subscribe button and share this video. See you in the next video.